Alarm clocks. For some people, those two words, just hearing them, it's like nails across a chalkboard. Some people, alarm clock goes off and they jump out of bed. They're ready to get going on their day. Other people, alarm clock goes off, snooze button, again and again and again. They've make alarm clocks now that when it goes off, the clock gets up and goes around the room, where you have to get out of bed, chase it around for it to stop. There's also apps now for the phone where before going to bed, you set the number of steps that you need to take in order for the alarm to go off. So you set it at 15, 20, 50 steps, and you're in bed and the alarm goes off. It will not turn off until you take that number of steps. And you can't sit in bed trying to move the phone like this to fake it. It knows you have to get up and take those steps. There's a buddy of mine in the seminary who was struggling to get up on time, and I gave him this brilliant idea to stop pressing the snooze button, and I challenged him to do that for a set number of weeks. And he took up the challenge, and 3 weeks later I asked him how he was doing. And he said, great. 3 weeks, I had not pressed the snooze button one time. And then he proceeded to show me his phone that had 4 separate alarms 10 minutes apart. He didn't press the snooze button, but he set 4 alarms. It doesn't matter how many alarms one does set or how many times they press the snooze, eventually you have to wake up. Our second reading, Paul's writing to the Christians in Rome. And it's just this, we're in the 13th chapter there as Paul's writing in his epistle. And there's just 4 verses that we hear from today in our second reading. And I just want to walk through those 4 verses. The very first thing, and he's telling and exhorting those Christians in Rome, he asks them, brothers and sisters, what time is it? It's time to wake up. Of course, Paul's not referring to actual sleep, but rather a moral or a spiritual slumber that the Christians in Rome are in. And there's an urgency to the readings. The season of Advent is to invoke in us a sense of waking up. Our second reading and then our gospel today with this urgency of waking up, and Jesus not so much telling us to wake up, but rather stay awake. Paul, the next verse says, for why stay awake or why wake up? He says, for salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. That is to say, you and I are closer today, this Advent, than last Advent of standing before him and being judged. Yesterday, I was bombarded with death. Began in the morning with celebrating the funeral of a 45-year-old man, father of 2 small boys, 5 and 9 years old, leaving behind those 2 boys and his wife. Later in the day, being called to Edwards Hospital with a family who's ready to take their loved one off of life support. And then towards the end of the day, many of you know Dave Doherty, and know that he's been sick for some time and was there at his house as he was literally breathing his last breaths. And as a priest who is around death a lot, talks a lot about death, and as just, 2-3 weeks ago, I was up here and mentioning that the month of November, the church encourages us to think about our own death, to meditate on our own death, because meditating and thinking about our death helps us and inform us how to live our lives. And as much as I say it and I think about it, I'm around death all the time. Yesterday, at the bedside of Dave, somebody who I'd played golf with a couple months ago, and seeing him at his last breath in that room last night, I remember turning to his son and said, "This is surreal." Like, it hit me for the first time in my life last night. Of just that will be me, and it's just surreal. And last night, after leaving there and getting a text from his wife informing me that just 45 minutes after I left, he did finally breathe his last and passed away, I found myself at the end of the night just in this chapel last night after I got home and thinking, realizing ultimately, again, the ultimate goal of our lives is conformity with Jesus. Striving for the sanctification of our family. How are you doing with that? How am I doing with that? To what extent might I need to wake from a spiritual slumber that I'm in? Next thing Paul goes on here in chapter 13, he says, after waking up, he says, throw off the works of darkness. Of course, after one wakes up in the morning, you have to do some sort of cleaning up. Whether you take a shower the night before, still, in the morning, you wake up and you still have to brush your teeth or splash water on your face, comb your hair. If you don't do any of those things in the morning, start doing those things, please. But you have to do something to clean up. Otherwise, eventually we smell. And so Advent is that time to wake up and smell yourself. And for me to smell myself. And if we do that, we will smell something bad. We're smelly people. God knows that about us. And oftentimes, we end up doing one of two things, if not both things. We turn our nose away from the smell. Like, I know the smell, but I'm just going to try to turn my nose as far as I can from how bad I smell, hoping, wishing, and counting on that it's just going to go away and clean up on itself. Or we grow so accustomed to the bad smell that we don't smell it anymore, or we don't think it smells bad anymore. Growing up on a hog farm, of course, I had this experience oftentimes, people coming over as friends growing up on the farm, or just recently as somebody from the seminary. A few years ago, born and raised in Seattle, in the city, came down to the farm on a Christmas break or Thanksgiving break. He goes into the hog building. For 30 seconds, he literally ran out gagging. I'm like, what's the matter? Smell doesn't bother me. I don't know what that says about me, but what is most threatening me right now in my life that is keeping me from being more like Jesus? In other words, what must go for me to thrive? What must go for me to be the man or woman that God's created me to be? What must go for me to be the man or woman that I want to be, that I need to be? What smells? What needs to be cleaned? And so Paul exhorts us, cast off the works of darkness, and he gives a list there of vices. Of course, it's not an exhaustive list, but to cast off these works of darkness so to be ready to meet Christ in the final judgment. And lastly here, Paul says after throwing off the works of darkness, he says to put on the Lord Jesus Christ. So after we wake up in the morning, we do something to clean up. We have to dress up. We've got to put the clothes on that we're going to have on for the rest of the day as we go about our day. So put on the Lord Jesus, Paul says. And I'm like, thanks, Paul. Sounds great. Put on the Lord Jesus Christ. What does that mean? Like I need something, like what does that look like, putting on the Lord Jesus? So I propose we do that this Advent by implementing two ancient spiritual disciplines into our lives. One spiritual discipline in the morning and one spiritual discipline at night before we go to bed. St. Francis de Sales wrote his masterpiece, The Introduction to the Devout Life, which is written to you all, the lay people, those who are in the world, working, have jobs, raising children. He talks about the importance in the Christian life of getting up early and putting on Christ in prayer. And I'm suggesting 10 minutes in the morning after waking up and spending time with the daily readings for the day, the gospel. You can find it online. You can enroll into Bishop Barron's email list, and he can send you the gospel every day in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, I think it comes. But to set time aside to be with him, and not just, I pray on my way to work, I pray while I'm at work, I pray when I'm doing this, I pray when I'm doing that. St. Francis de Sales, who's writing to you all, he wouldn't take that. He says, the importance of setting time aside, structured time, to be with him. We make time for things that we find most important. Nothing's more important than intimacy with Jesus and cultivating that intimacy that we, deep down, we know it, we crave it, we desire it. And so that, whether that's waking up in the morning and just not pressing the snooze, or implementing something that St. Jose Maria Escriva said is implementing the heroic minute, which you got 1 minute to get out of bed. That alarm goes off, it's heroic, but you got 1 minute. And spend time reading the gospel once, twice, and seeing where it is that the Lord is speaking to me in the gospel today. Secondly, spiritual discipline at night is from Ignatius of Loyola, the examen prayer. Not an examination of conscience, but rather an examen of consciousness, where we simply just place ourselves in God's presence, calling to mind that God is here now with me, and then moving to noticing to where God was throughout my day. Where was he? Where did I notice God's truth, his goodness, his beauty throughout my day? Maybe where did I notice any lies in my life? And this is a great thing to do with your family, with your children at night before going to bed, and asking them, where did you see God throughout the day? That compared to looking at what other people did throughout their day and seeing and maybe feeling bad about ourselves that she made lasagna for her family and kids, and I just put in frozen fish sticks in the oven. And then we end up going to bed with this last thought in our mind. Or as we're sleeping, or at night, we're just staring at a screen and we wake up with the phone hitting us on the head. But with both of these spiritual disciplines, to see them with fresh eyes. As oftentimes we've grown up, I've said many times up here, of to pray. And we know that. We've got a desire. I want to pray more. I need to pray more. I want to pray more. And then we can maybe get tired with that. See this Advent, these 3-4 weeks with fresh eyes. The fruit that the Lord wants to bear in my life through these two spiritual disciplines. And they're spiritual disciplines for a reason, because they're hard to implement. We're habitual people. If we're not in these habits in the morning or at night, it's hard to implement. But most good things make us stronger. That's why we call them a discipline. They're difficult to do. And so this Advent, let us be very intentional with waking up, with cleaning up, and dressing up so we can be ready for his coming. Whatever you do, don't snooze. Because as the saying goes, you snooze, you lose.